Okay, I got Zeppelin going through my head. All right, I've been working on some things and I've been keeping busy. Keeping busy. So I hope everybody else has. Let's take a look and see where we're at. So there's the finished page for today that's up on screen right now. This is the Kandahar Giant page that I drew at 7 a.m. this morning. Ridiculous. I've been working on some commission stuff today and, getting some stuff done. Corbin is sleeping in the corner, which is helping in his book. So thank you very much for all the help today, my friend. I've been doing a whole bunch of studies for a project that I'm currently on. I hear squeaking in the hallway. Lucy might be coming in. Just trying to get some stuff done. I'll show you in a second. Quick drink of agua. All right. So let's switch up the viewpoint here. Hi there. And hey, we've got, hi Linda, how you doing? Hey Tim. And this says, hi Corbin. Corbin snores. This is what I got. All right, so here's in the camera, this is the original art for the Kandahar Giant page that you just saw. And I better, before I forget, let's put our 77 2025 Kandahar Giant. Gary H. suggestion. And there we go. So we'll throw that in a pile. Now, the page we're working on today is 78 2025. This is 78 of the very specifically done one-page stories. It's actually, I'm in the, I think I'm at 200 right now for pages so far this year. And that's not just one-page stories. That includes Sunday pieces. That includes all these little studies and tests that I'm doing. I'll show you what I mean by that. So I've got all of these things, and so at first they look like just mud, right? And but what they are is me trying to figure out for this one commission that I'm doing, a forest. So that's what these little studies are. And if you're interested, I can show you where that's going. And it's going to be, so what I need to do is this. Let's see, I got my little small change. That's what, small change, get it? I've got all these pencil nubs, and I draw right down to the very nub of a pencil. So these holders are really fantastic for helping with that. So we've got these little bits. Now, what I need to put together for these is by looking at the composition. So I've got some trunks roughed in really loosely, and what is going to happen is there is a fair amount of branches that are going to go across here and throughout the composition. I'll move in. There we go. So what I'm doing is that I'm sitting down now and I'm starting to put in a bunch of smaller trunks in the background, smaller trees. And so you can see how they're not necessarily that opaque. They're not really showing through. But what this is helping me to understand for the composition that I'm working on, and is that these various trunks are in the background. So the darker ones are in the foreground, the lighter ones are in a background. And so when I sit down with, a black pencil, and I now come through here and I start putting in little details like branches that cut across the scene and have smaller twigs that break off of those. So as I'm putting these things in the composition, and I look at those trees that are in the background, and so I take that basic value that I've put in for that tree trunk, which works as a guide, and I start putting in, bits of information across there. As I'm filling in some of these branches that cut back and forth across between the various trunks, and the composition starts to become more elaborate and get more filled and a little more creative, a little more busy, so that as I get closer and closer through to the next stage, one of the things that I can do, let me find a weapon. There we go, got one. One of the things that I can do now is start going in between these trees and punching some value in there. Now, ideally, I want to use things like, let me see if I got one. Oh, here's a yellow, because I want that sun to start coming through between those different trees that are in the background. So you can see things will start to get even a little bit more busy. I'll have to come back in with certain spots and put some of these darker marks back in. But it's all about this whole layering kind of a thing that goes on. So now I start putting in the light coming through the trees. And so it starts to look more like a forest. But it takes a few different passes in order to get it. And the reason that it does so is that we need to find the sophistication of all these overlapping marks that imply the density of said forest. So as we come through and we start getting some of these different marks and shapes in our foreground, hold on, we're almost there, then I'm going to start to see, and ideally the viewer is going to start to see, how the light is now moving through, and we're getting interesting layers of color overlapping. The white now over top of the yellow peeks through, gives a luminosity to the light. So as we come through here, and then see how I'm leaving little touches of value and little spaces in between, because this is where we can come back in with those dark browns, and we can imply some little branches in between there. So now we've got, for those back layers, there's branches cutting across. Because we're using black for our foreground ones and light brown for our background ones, now we're starting to get more depth. That's the theory. That's the theory, Timothy Leary. So there you go. And as we go on and on with doing this, it's the reason that I'm testing it out is to have a better and more clear understanding of it, and what's the easiest way, because the larger composition that I'm working on right now is 2 foot by 3 foot, and so you don't want to just be constantly painting layers and layers and layers. So I've set up myself with a number of these little pre-made background values, so that I can sit down and figure out what is the easiest way to go about making those marks. And because they're different densities, and because they're different color sets that are used, I can sit down here and I can start saying, well, if I put a light value in the background, and then I start throwing in all of these values here, how's that going to work for me? And focus in on tighter areas than just the whole of the composition. If I just focus in on how these trees work together, what's that going to tell me? So I don't try that. Try playing with stuff and seeing. Now, some people will look at this and go, why don't you just sit down and replicate the exact picture in small increments as you go along? Because I'm lazy. I don't want to. I want to find a way to put down these marks and imply these scenarios, in a simple fashion, so that I don't have to sit down and go through the whole thing and finding all those complicated and complex ways of making those marks. So if I've got this here now, and I'm coming through and I've got these different marks chopped in. So if I come through with the light now, what's that going to tell me? Is this an easier way to go about doing it and to find the light shining through the trees? Is to lay in all these branches first and then to come through and find these values. So, lots of different ways to come at it. It's just literally a case of what works in this way on this project. So there we go. There's another approach to it, and just sort of zooming in on an area. Anyways, that's why I do these little quick tests and studies, and they're fast and they're dirty, and with the fastness and the dirtiness of it, my camera is shifted. Hopefully that's better. So with the fastness and the dirtiness of it, it helps me to better understand in a more clear and ready way how I can go about doing that. So there we go. So yeah, I hope that's in some kind of way interesting to folks. So if I come through again like this, here's another fun bit. And so you know how this width is this wide, implying that this is the space between these two trees. Well, if I come through, and I've done a few of these, right? So if I come through this way and cut some tighter shapes, so now I'm implying that these yellow shapes can be even farther back trees that are even more illuminated. So, which adds even more density. Now, that's not to say that I'm not going to come through in the foreground and put some marks in here again. Where's that darker? There we go. This old chestnut. It's a chestnut brown. So now I can come through and add some more marks here. So now I've got more layers again. It's trying things out. It's testing stuff out, seeing what we find. So that's, here's the boring thing that I'm doing. Well, I don't know if people find this interesting. For all I know, people are like, what are you doing? Just stick to the comic pages, monkey boy. Nobody's interested in this other nonsense you do to afford peanut butter. Not really peanut butter guy either. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes the stuff that we think about when we're not doing the expected thing, and what I mean by that is, so with doing one-page stories, there's a certain thought process that comes through for doing comic book pages. There is a certain expectation of our readers that they perhaps might think that what are you thinking about when you're not making comics? You're probably reading comics, aren't you? Right? That's a fair assumption. It really is. It's a fair assumption. But it's not entirely true all the time, because most people, our influences and our specific interests aren't always locked up in one neat little box, are they? So now I'm coming through here and that the same marker pen or paint marker, I'll get the words eventually, um, and adding more light to it by hitting this or again. And so now we've got more luminescence in these areas because the yellow is crisper because we've gone over the marks that we've already made. I like that idea, making small sketches to work out a better way for a bigger work. Oh yeah, and if you can do that and save yourself labor, you know, do so. Explore and play. I'm glad you like that, Linda. So, but coming in again with that yellow is going to make even more crisp and strong and clear colors, so that when we sit down and we go at this a few times, sorry, I'm moving around my background. So we sit down and we go at this a few times and we see where some of these connections are between the layers, and we can make little pinches of color in there. But eventually we'll get an interesting kind of a density that implies greater depth in the forest. That's the idea. But back to what I was saying about interests and influence. So oftentimes your projects that you're working on, I find, are going to become more complex and more interesting if, let's say, in the field of comics, if you would like for your comics to be different, to be interesting in a way that other people's aren't. And by that, you have story ideas that have more depth and resonance to them, and a uniqueness that starts to come through in your work. Like, let's use Michael Mignola as an example. Now, Mike Mignola has his whole Bureau of Paranormal Research and Development universe, BPRD, Hellboy, Ape Sapien, and all these different books and characters that he creates for this world. And people look at it and go, it's so interesting, it's so different. So, well, that's because Mike Mignola is a huge fan of fables and fairy tales and stories like that. And so because of that fact, he knows a great deal of information about Irish folk tales and Scandinavian folk tales and the Dracula and which is an old vampire story, all of these interesting things beyond superherodom or beyond what a lot of contemporary people look into. And so because of those things, he incorporates and embeds all those things in his storytelling world, which makes it seem very unique and original and very different than the expectation of the form. Walt Simonson, same thing. He's done a series called Ragnarok. Now, Simonson was a writer-artist on Thor for Marvel Comics in the 1970s, 80s maybe. The best period of that book, in my opinion. So, no offense, contemporary writers, but there's just something different he did because he embedded the Norse fables in there in a really strong way, similar to how Kirby was doing it in the 60s. Simonson brought it right back and got deep into it and started looking at the potentiality of Ragnarok, which is the Norse fairy tale for the end of the world. And how do we avert Ragnarok from happening? How do we stem off, the end of Valhalla, the city of the Norse, etc.? How do we keep ourselves from being wiped from existence? And more importantly, how does Marvel Comics keep from losing all of its characters of Loki and Thor and everybody else because they all die and get reborn in a new age with new iterations of themselves? Well, so Simonson does this absolutely wonderful approach to it because he has a full awareness and knowledge of Norse mythology. It works. Well, it didn't go where it could have gone in a more interesting way. Simonson would have liked to have saw those stories continue through, but you can't lose your licensed character for your major company. So they have to bring Thor back around to being just Thor again on Thor Adventures with, his hammer and continuing things on. We can't go the entire route of Ragnarok. So years later, Simonson independently comes out with a series called Ragnarok that follows through on that story that was started at Marvel, where Thor's face has been grabbed and tainted by death. So the part of his face looks like the visage of a skull now. He's doing his best to hold off the end of existence, where this god dies against this monster and this guy dies against fighting off that monster, and Tyr's arm is ripped off by Garm, the guard dog of the afterlife, and so Tyr is going to die facing against Garm, and the two will wipe each other out. And it's sort of an end of all of this epic, so that at the end of everything, where Thor dies drowning in the venom of the Midgard serpent, which is a snake that goes around the entire earth trying to bite its own tail, and eventually is large enough to do so just at the same time as Thor kills it. So now you've got incredible pressure on the earth, and the age has to everything starts over again new, and which means new gods to take place of the old ones, etc. Now Kirby, when he was feeling unfulfilled in the 70s with Marvel, he left Marvel to do a bunch of books for DC, and one of those books that he did was called The New Gods. One of the things that he wanted to do before that Stan Lee said no to was that he wanted to reboot. He wanted to take Thor to the next level and Ragnarok, and reboot Thor and everything. And they said, we can't do that. Those are licensed characters. Just like 10, 15, 20 years later, they said the same thing to Simonson. And so Simonson said, well, I've run this course and we've averted Ragnarok at the last minute, and now I'm off to a different thing, which he would follow up on, like I just described, years later in his Ragnarok series, and follow it through and fulfill it. Well, what Kirby did, and the reason that I've kind of done this kind of crazy cyclical thing is, so in the 60s, Thor comics, great. In the 70s, unfulfilled, he goes over to the DC. Now at Marvel, he's created X-Men, Hulk, Avengers. He created Captain America in the 1940s with Joe Simon. That's at Marvel now as one of the Avengers. The X-Men, the Avengers, the Hulk, the Fantastic Four, and a number of other villains and subsidiary, side characters and things like that. While Ditko's done Doctor Strange, Spider-Man. So anyhow, Kirby goes. Ditko's already left. Kirby goes over to DC, and Ditko, I think, is at Carlton at the time, creating The Question, Captain Atom, all these other characters. But when Kirby goes over to DC, he creates what's called the Fourth World. And the Fourth World, or the New Gods, is the new race of gods, which has existed for a long time, but it's basically what would have come out of Thor. So you've got all these different things. The reason that Kirby was so interested in these things and wanted to see them fulfilled is that he's read a lot of mythology and stuff as he's doing these Thor books and stuff, and he wants to see it follow through to its end. So he creates these incredibly interesting and complex characters that are being recreated again and again and again ever since at DC. But it's so compelling because he has an interest in additional material than just reading comic books. The Hulk is interesting, and it's even more interesting if you've read Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. If you've read Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde and you read the Incredible Hulk comics, oh, things make a lot more sense now. Things make even more sense now because you can see an influence from this pre-existing classic piece of literature. It's what you do with a thing before you and what you make of it. When you look at all of these superhero types that are all the guy with the gun who's going in to do the vigilante justice on stuff, and how far can we take that? Well, the creators, I think it's Carlos Esquera and Steve Moore, I think it is, maybe. I might be wrong on this. They go and they create this exaggerated, completely psychotically amped up level of vigilante character who works in the system. The entire system is now this judge, jury, executioner types that drive around on their motorcycles and their word is absolute law in a city that's so, like New York, is so massively overpopulated and everything is so extreme and the street crime is extreme, and some of the sci-fi elements like isolation cubes. You're caught jaywalking, you're in an isolation cube for 2 weeks. Well, you're not fixing a person who's done a petty crime. You're making it worse because an isolation cube is a 3 foot by 3 foot box that is statically charged, right? Energetically charged, little static shocks. So as you're in this thing for a 3 foot by 3 foot box that you're cramped inside of, it's constantly giving you little buzzes and keeps you awake for weeks, and you come out crazy. So your 2 week charge for vandalism has now produced somebody who's not entirely right. So they're not doing good things, but this character, Judge Dredd, who's the principal example of one of these law types, goes around and tries to fix the problems in extreme ways and really never makes them better. But the reason that this is all so compelling and so hyper exaggerated and draws the interest of so many people is because of the fact that they're clearly reading other materials and taking the influences of those and incorporating them in, like Brave New World by Aldous Huxley and stuff like that, where the society is so tightly contained and controlled. This would be the hyper exaggeration, the entire other direction for Judge Dredd. But these are clearly projects that are highly influenced by other things. So when you're drawing things, if whatever it is, whether it's storytelling or painting, static painting, or comics or whatever it might be, allow yourself to understand your influences and allow yourself to experiment, to explore other directions with your creativity, so that when you come back and you do things like what we're about to do with today's one-page story, which is a continuation of what I started at 10 o'clock this morning when I streamed briefly then. So those influences are going to poke through, and some of these things that we pick up in our painting explorations or mixed media explorations, or just sketches and doodles and trying to figure things out, like how do I make a forest look more dense. These things inform how we go about our mark making and our storytelling in our comics. So play and explore, and don't be afraid to, whatever the rules you think there are, break them. Where you can't do that in comics, why not? I could show some examples. I haven't done an awful lot of this of late, but let's do a little bit of it today. All right. Now, I've shown Sienkiewicz a fair amount on this channel. Bill Sienkiewicz, Sienkiewicz. Some people would pronounce that Sienkiewicz, but his father anglicized it when they came to America, and they're Sienkiewicz. So it doesn't sound as Polish as it is, because maybe there was some pressure against and judgment of Polish people. So you can see how much difference we've made now, making this look a little bit more and more like a forest than where we started. So same piece of paper, as you move across to the opposite side, you can see additional little bits of complexity now coming through. And so now we're looking at more and more of a dense forest. Here's one more little sneaky thing. Hold on. Wait for me. I'm coming back. I'm not teasing, I promise you. I just have to lean a long way. All right, we're back. Now, light blue. So if you go in and you find certain spots where the sky peeks through your forest, just certain areas, not the whole thing, just little spots, okay? And you put those blue hits in, and then you let them dry. Give them a minute. Just be patient. Blue takes a moment. It takes its own time. So when we let those dry, and then we come back through with our good old white Johnson here. I don't know why I named my paint marker Johnson. I don't know. So we've let this dry now. So now when we come through and we add little hits of white over top of the blue, it looks more like those are pokes of the actual sun and sky sneaking through. Yabba dabba do. Okay, so I'll show you a couple things, and just give me a second. I'm going to walk across the room to one of the other bookshelves, and I've got here a couple of neat things. This is John J. Muth. Now, there's certain artists that appear over time, and they are clearly doing different things. And the reason that they're doing different things is because they're stepping outside of a box and really utilizing these external influences that they might have. Now, I've shown a lot of people like Alex Toth, Bill Sienkiewicz, Dave McKeon. These are big ones to me. But in addition to them, here are two dudes that I've shown before, and I'm going to show them until my lips fall off. Now, this is John J. Muth. So this is a book. Am I zoomed out? There we go. This is The Mythology of an Abandoned City, by John J. Muth. And so he has gone through. Now, this guy has done a book called Moonshadow for Epic, 12-issue series. Absolutely genius and beautiful thing. It's so important, I'm typing it in. That's not to say that everything else that I don't type in isn't important. It is. But in this case, I'm going to actually cite the example. Moonshadow. Okay? And the person's name is John J. Muth. Now, what's interesting about Muth is that he uses graphite, charcoal, and he uses Conte and mixed media. And he's adapted M by Fritz Lang, which is the film maker that Fritz Lang did Metropolis. Now, before he did Metropolis, he did a black and white film called M. And it's black and white largely because of it's the 30s and the filmmaking process is, highly challenging at best. But there are elements so it's more of a sepia or earth tones as far as the color goes in that film. But there are certain elements that shine out as red. M is about a murderer in the city, in the city of Berlin, I think it is. I think it's Berlin. I could be mistaken, and the person is murdering children, and terrible, terrible things. But there's certain elements that are recurring: red balloons, red pencils, things like that, and a little red dress on somebody. And so when those things hit, when you've got a lot of earth tone, black and white imagery, and then suddenly there's something that has a red tone shining through, bingo, bango, bongo. You've got symbolic imagery that you're going to follow around. Similar thing happens in Schindler's List, where there's a little girl in a red dress, and we follow her through the city in this black and white scenario in the ghetto of Warsaw. It was done by Lang first, as in 60, 70 years first. So, all right, so here is his work. Now, this is graphite. So here's some pencil work, and he's telling this story about the mythology of an abandoned city, and this is the Sleepwalker. So you see where he does these illustrations of this character, and at this point, this isn't him where he's tuned his machine to be wowie zowie quite yet, but it's still incredibly impressive and powerful. But as it goes along, that looks like Sir Anthony Hopkins. You see in his storytelling that there starts to be a little more refinement in the visuals that he puts together and the images that he makes. So that by the time we get through this, and he goes and does, I think this precedes Moon Shadow, here's where you're already getting destabilization in the surface. So you get this, which is wonderful. Love that. Okay, so this is like a light acrylic wash on here, so you can still see the construction paper peeking through. I do similar things to this, but I discovered Lang's refined way of approaching it much later than when I'd started. So here's where we get some of this stuff that just, now here we go. Here he goes on to the next level. And this is where you see it is so soft and subtle in how he applies it. So here's a person studying film and making incredible visual comic stories with his executions and his drawings. The control of that is one step beyond. Right? So soft in its application, so subtle, so clean. Clean's a tough one. So there's where Muth really gets going. Look at the hit of red and the sepia. Whamma jamma. Look at that. Right? Not a photo. So this is where you really see things just, wow. There's a control of method, but he applies this control of graphite and charcoal and Conte and maybe ink, or whatever it is that and maybe acrylic, whatever it is that he's using here, he utilizes for comics book storytelling. And so here is his adaptation of Dracula. Okay, so a symphony in moonlight and nightmares. And so he's got watercolor work here now. That's the Demeter, the ship that Dracula rolled in on, that washed up on the English shores, smashed up. So he's done this image in watercolor. And very subtle shape of a boat, you know. Let me see what else I can. There's some nudity, and I want to take it easy on that. So here is the castle, and so I'm not sure if this is watercolor or ink, but again, here's a person utilizing skills garnished through more classical representations of Gothic work and 1930s black and white film. And when he does this in comic form, you know, it takes on an entirely different level and approach. This is the Demeter. This is the castle. This is it leaving It's either the castle in Dover, because it's got the white hills, it looks like. So this is where he's going to wash up the boat on. But you can see the boat looks ragged and the sails look ripped. And the birds are flying about doing what birds do on the water. But all of these little elements together tell you this Dexter narrative. How you doing, Salty? Welcome aboard, sir. So we're looking at the work of John J. Muth. So, and yet here's more examples of him taking skills that he's garnished by studying works in a different way and applying them in comic book form. So, bat flying up the castle. That's great, right? That's the kind of thing that just makes you go, what in the world? What in the what's and the who's and the what's? Here's the wolf at the window. There's the wolf that is the count. And there's Lucy being swept up and enthralled under its power. Yes. So anyways, there's another example of his work to look at. This is the last thing I'll show. This is his sketchbook. I've shown this, I think, before. I probably have. I think it's one of the greatest little sketchbooks that I've come across. And paintings, drawings, and ideas. Now, here is what I'm talking about when I talk about having a control of form. So, this is a forest, and I think that this is done in charcoal. I think it is. I'm not sure. Generally, he says, no, I'm sorry, this is oil. This is a piece in oil, but it looks like charcoal. There's such a control in that. And then this, of course, is oil as well, the skull. So, palace. So he's destabilized the surface here. There's this granulation that happens because of how he's applying his mark making. I think the camera can only pick it up so much because the subtlety level of it. But here's a much better example. This texture here is Cobrazyville. So if you have a highly loquacious amount of pigment that's, like really watered down salt, like, there's so much solubility that's applied to this. There's so much wet in the surface that when you go over top of this existing black piece of composition, you do these quick washes, and then maybe even go so far as to start to sweep away some of the value that's there, and it'll wipe off really fast because of the pigment, or maybe you run the pencil crayon through it. I don't know how he does it, is my point. But it takes a pose of somebody in their face in this dark outfit, and it turns it into something else. So, but this is a person who uses, gotta be careful what we're showing, all of his work into, his fine art work into comic book storytelling. This is a painting, the large canvas that he did, it's 8 feet by 24 feet, so 8 feet high. Hi, Liz, welcome aboard. 8 feet high by 24 feet across. And because of height, he's turned one of his easels into a, what do you call that, a lift of some kind. So here he is assembling the whole thing, and then he gets his kids and some of their friends, I believe, to go and put all kinds of crazy business. Here's paint, go to town, kids. But it can't, don't do any pictures of things per se, but just go and have fun smashing paint all over the surface. And then he takes that and he goes over it again and he creates this really interesting base. But you can see what he's doing here, where he's using light to carve out the trees. Does it show? Let me see if I can find the large canvas later. Yeah, here's one of the examples of his, that's a forest at night painting. So there's gold. You can see the reflection of it in the water. But there's lit up fire or whatever it might be in the forest at night. View from a tiny boat. So, yeah, here's a guy who uses, two different approaches. He does his classical approach, and he does his sequential storytelling approach. And in addition to that, stupid pencil I keep dropping. Oh, it's so far down on the floor. Anyhow, should be so tall. Here he is doing a mixed media book with, see, there's his forest. That's what it ends up being. Sanctus is a book where he's got images on one page and tissue paper and vellum and stuff like that, and overlays, and yeah, impressive stuff. Anyways, there's gold to represent land. You got to try different things, folks. So there's Muth, and the other person, P. Craig Russell. Now, brace yourself. There might be some less than fully clad individuals in this. So here's a guy. I'll just show a few pages of Russell. So he adapted the entirety of Wagner's plays, The Ring of the Nibelung series, based on Norse mythology. And so Wagner wrote, anyways. And so there's an entire narrative that goes along with that for the opera that's performed to it, and that is the Ring of the Nibelung cycle. So it's about Odin and a young man who has fallen in love with one of his Valkyries, or the young maidens that go and collect the souls of the dead and bring them to Valhalla, where they'll fight in the end war, the war at the end of time, Ragnarok. We're back to that again. And one of them falls in love with one of the maidens, and they run away to have a child. And Odin chases them to the world to destroy them, and they are the child is raised by sometimes troll, sometimes dragon, sometimes wizard, and it's this beautiful epic thing. Now, Mickey Monthilo is also, is it or no? It's Alex Elise, I think it is, that has adapted this as well, and I can show you that. But P. Craig Russell's style of art, and why I'm showing you him, is highly influenced by Art Deco and Bauhaus and those kinds of movements where you have all of this interesting, decorative, fiddly bits of information. And look at the sweep. Look at this nonsensical spaceship. Who would spend the time drawing all these curves? Or, I'm sorry, fabricating all these curves to make a spaceship out of? Who's going to do all this business? Nobody. And so trying to find another example that's not too overtly nude. But look at how the clouds, the highly stylized clouds. So here's a guy bringing all of those, sensibilities from Bauhaus and Art Deco and Art Nouveau and even Raphaelites, pre-Raphaelite artwork styles, and he's bringing all of that sensibility into comic book making. Converting some of these textures and patterns into decorative elements and language to just surround a page. The sun is at circle, spirilic, and then totemic. 1, 2, 3 panels. Same thing as it becomes closer to it, it becomes more ornate. I mean, that's a whole different level than your standardized superhero punch-up thing. Now, Russell also adapted the Elric story by Michael Moorcock, Elric of Narbonne, which is funny because another one of Michael Moorcock's characters, Corum, Prince of the Scarlet Robe, I think it is, was adapted by Mignola. So, and interesting stuff. Look at this hunk of rock. And here's a gyroscopter trying to get over and drop into the ground with this hunk of rock. The Voyage to the Moon by Cyrano de Bergerac. 1 Arrival on the moon. Yeah. One of my favorite characters in literature was adapted by Terry Gilliam. Now, there's two of these types of films where he took great leaps with. There's the Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus, and then, of course, there's the greatest thing that he did, which was the Adventures of Baron Munchausen. And it's about a character who tells these highly exaggerated tales where he is the principal star, and he went. One time he took a voyage to the moon where he spoke to the king of the moon and his beautiful wife. You know, and every female that comes across the Baron is, of course, completely smitten with him. And, you know, at one point, to escape the bombardment of Paris by the Turks, is it Paris, or anyways, it's some city, he creates a dirigible made entirely of ladies' undergarments. Just nonsense. That's P. Craig Russell in his studio. Yeah, very classic, very classy schmashy. And so it talks about his work and his time he spent on Conan, and you can see where he's working from the house style, and then he starts to develop his own style. This is his Elric material, and you can just see where he just leans in and then takes off and starts creating incredibly stylized and wicked works. So yeah, look up whatever, lean into whatever influences affect you and that you find compelled towards, yourself compelled towards, and embrace those things and incorporate those things into your work. If you like, hi Lucy, if you like Saturday morning cartoons and you want to, you're doing a sci-fi series where serious space detective and why not have them land on a planet of cartoon characters? Why not? Who's to tell you you're wrong? Lucy, what's the matter? Hi, come over here. Come up here. This squeaky little thing is our new cat. And she does everything the hard way. Up here. There you go, you made it. Look at you. Okay, here's today's page that we're working on. And Lucy, you can't help. So let me take you through it. Our suggestion, I cannot remember who it's by because I forgot to write that down, but I at least got the suggestion written down, which is last humans alive are living on a satellite that's orbiting Earth. So this is a jelly-plated surface. You want to say hi? Lucy says, hi, everybody. Lucy looks exactly like Corbin. She's 1/3 the size and a lovely little lady. But she also looks like Baby, my cat who passed away. It's kind of weird and interesting. But this is Lucy. Say hi. Hey, I'm Lucy. How you doing? Give me $5. That's not what she sounds like. She sounds like a lady. We call her Squeaky. So the first things that we've done using this jelly-plated surface is, so here's where the jelly plating actually worked. Hi. Okay, well, you can sit here, but don't get in the way. Okay, there you go. So this part is the best part that has appeared, whereas this, oh, people are saying hi to you. Yeah, Linda says hi, Lucy. So what I've done here is I've taken some of this interesting little bits of business, this white scatter shot value and stuff like that, turned it into stars here. Did our space satellite, our first panel. We used some watercolor in here as well as ballpoint pen. Our tools that we've used so far is this, and this, and this. That's what we've used so far on today's page. So, so here's our panel 1. There's our satellite, okay? And so using the white gel pen, I've tried to bring the satellite forward, but by flattening out the background, putting this blue watercolor throughout it, and yet keeping this rough, rounded nature of the jelly plate image in place. Like I didn't want to mess that up by going and doing a proper rectangle or stuff like that. I like the characteristics of that. So then our next panel, we have come through and we have done the black and white of, I think Lucy has figured out that Mom is away at a conference. I think she's finally figured it out. So what I was going to do was this, and I got to go and grab the water from over here, my wall easel, because we've been working on the commission since this morning. All right, so this is, this container is, it's nice and long if I want to mix a whole bunch of things. This is what I have my watercolors on, okay? And yeah, so I've got dollops of watercolor from the tube on here for me to utilize. Sorry, there it is there. White, a deep blue, a mid blue, green, dark green, a yellow, a sepia, an ochre. What have I got? I know I've got a burnt sienna and a burnt sienna, an ochre, and a what is this red? I'm trying to think where the red is. I can't. And black, which you can see I don't touch very much. Anyhow, so yeah, so I'm going in, picking up some of that dark blue here, and I'm going to come in and we're going to do something similar to what we've done in that first panel. And so I'm going to come and I'm going to push back some of the spaces in behind us here. Just to, see, so by doing this, it further separates our foreground characters from what's happening behind them, which is ideal for us because we want the focus here to be on our people in the front. So I'll give that a minute to dry, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put another little wash that goes over top of everything. So the places that already have some blue on it will become more crisp, and the rest of it will unify and flatten out and push back. Go team, go. Go team, go team, go. So we'll come back at that. So these are the only, this is the only other thing I've added to this page. So what I suggested for the story idea, so we've got satellite. What are our key points? Last humans alive living on a satellite orbiting Earth. So last humans, well, we got them. These are the last people alive. They're on a satellite orbiting Earth. Satellite. Here's our people looking at something. This one's resting on their hand. This one's leaning on something else. A little bit of emotion going on through those characters. So for this panel, because of whatever it was that was jelly plated, I have no idea what it was. Looks like some kind of frame in there, but no idea. I flipped this up and turned it sideways, and I'm no idea what it was. Just a page out of a magazine. Some kind of machine. Anyhow, this, which actually looks like at 50, 40, 30 maybe, it looks like some kind of reader. I don't know. But what we're going to do with this is that we're going to use this as a view screen that has Earth in it. See, it's like almost like I said to put Earth here. So what I'm going to do, pull back, is I'm going to take these three people in their poses and I'm going to put them in the foreground here, looking at the viewer of Earth. And so now we've contextualized the page. Satellite, people looking at something. Here's what they're looking at. And it happens to be Earth. And our story is about the last humans are alive, are living on a satellite orbiting Earth. Now, so textually, what you can add in is somebody saying, you know, something along the lines of the fact that they're orbiting the planet. Somebody can make some kind of reference towards that and say, you know, how many times have we orbited the planet now and not seen any sign of, not got any sign of response? I don't know, 67. Okay, so how do we feel about that? You can have that kind of conversation in place. So you don't have to show the satellite going ooh, ooh, ooh around the Earth. The text implies it. So looking at their poses here, I need to figure out, so this one here, the center person, is in the foreground. Now whatever this is here, I'm going to use it, right? I'm going to incorporate that in. So here they are leaning, and I'll zoom in for this a little bit more. Can't go too much because I want to keep both these things. I'm going to get my big head out of the way. So what my intent is now is to reverse these guys. Straight up flip it and reverse it. Right, so this one's leaning on their hand on whatever this frame is. So we're not going to see their hand because it's in front of them. But what we are going to need to put in here is their body language so that they're leaning forward. So how I'm going to do that is I'm going to have the upper body moving on this angle and the lower body moving on that angle to counterbalance it. And then, because this center character is intended to be a female, I'm going to allow a little more shape to the hips. Now the other hand, or the other arm, is leaning here as well. This one's come up to the chin, but this one is dangling forward, to the opposite side of this device. So then the other thing we need to do is collar. Work our way up to the person's collar here and get some wrinkles, some shapes into the arm, and same on the other side. It's a little hard to see because I'm trying to show you both the panels, right? So now we need to do the back of their head. So we know they've got this raised cut here. Need a drink. Oh, dry face today, dry mouth today. And let's put their ears in and their face. And then we can also have, there's the top of their hand there. So I'll zoom in a little bit more here. Wow. So here we go. There's that, and there's that pose there. So there's our first person. And so now when I come through here, I'm going to, use the white pencil to pull them out of this background area, right? So now the other guy beside them is, you got their head in a side position. So I need to have that in place so that they're looking in this way. Is that in camera? Nope. A little bit over. There we go. So because they're in this side view right there, we're going to, and leaning forward, we're going to put them in here like so. Their hair. Now, I think he's too big. I'm going to cut him back. We'll fix this. So we'll put his, I want to make his position a little more interesting, and because we don't really show much of his body, let's do this. Oh, you know what I was going to do? I was going to go get my haircut today, and I forgot to do it. It's all right. It's okay. All right, so here is his outfit, his uniform, but I'm going to have him I'll have his arm here as he's holding on to this frame, and we'll have his other arm holding on to said frame as well. Sleeves rolled up. We can get away with doing this little flare to his costume because we didn't show any of it in that first panel other than the collar, right? So here he is holding on to the frame, and his body is in this kind of a relaxed position where he's leaning against the frame thing, right? Right. So our third person, I mentioned this morning, so these two are closer and larger, right? So this person's farther back. So in this case, in the reverse, they are going to be larger. And the reason that they're going to be larger is because they're closer to us. So here is their arm leaning on something in front of them. And there's the seam, and then there comes their collar raised up. So this is their head has been resting on their hand, and then the other arm is down in front of them. My perspective is a little bit, or my proportioning is a little bit wonky right now. We'll figure it out. So there's this, and here's their outfit, buckles in at the sides, and moves along like so. So their other hand is in front of them, and then this hand is bent on whatever this object is in the foreground that this one's leaning on. So this is not this, he's not on the same thing that they are. And then we'll put, he's got much higher hair and much bigger ears. So there that guy is. Not that much bigger, is he? I think I need to thicken up his midsection, like so. His noggin a little bit more of a noggin. There we go. We'll fix this up. So here's that guy now. Okay, so here we have our three standing there at the viewer from the reverse shot of our three looking into the viewer. So now we're going to go into here. I've got this white pencil that the lead keeps breaking in because something's happened to this pencil. Did I not? Freak out. I hate when you sharpen pencils and the lead keeps breaking. I hate it so much. Flames around my hands. So here I am putting some white in to our characters to pull them towards the frame or the camera, right? And to remove all of that random information. There's interesting colors in the form, but all of that is pushed behind. So there's this character, and then here is this one. Now I gotta do a little bit of filling around here. Let's focus on the uniform part first. And I'm going to come in with the white gel pen, and we'll start putting in some of those details in a moment. But before we do that, let's take our blue pen and put this railing in that they're laying on. Let's build some of this up a little bit. In between our characters. And then this is the one. I've gone too far down. That's all right. Who cares? And this way, we're tying it into our composition and using the little benefit that using this jelly plated surface is going to give us. Okay, so now let's define this a little more clearly. You got some little white circles there and there, which is great. But let's more clearly define our frame. Now, this person's hair is not black as it is with the others. So I'm going to come in now with the, where did I put the brush? There's the brush. I'm going to come in now with this watercolor, okay, and I'm going to do a couple different things here. One is I'm going to do what I told you I was going to do a minute ago, and that is apply the watercolor to this section here so that we can make it clear to the viewer that this is in the back behind them. Okay, and then now, and then we'll do the same thing with the floor. All right, so now they should be popping right out because there we've pushed everything else back. That's the theory. That's the theory, Timothy. Anyways, so I'm coming in with this blue again, and it's really charged up with pigment because I want to control the focus. And what I mean by I want to control the focus is that by pushing back everything around the screen, where they're looking at Earth, should make Earth shimmy shimmy cocoa pop a little bit more there. That's an official term, by the way. Vicky W. O'Sullivan. Hello Vicky, how are you today? All right, so there's our third panel coming together now. Let's reverse the second panel, and then we'll get in here in a second and replicate our roof system, our ceiling system that we started to define there, and then let's put some white in on our characters and our third character here. So this is our suggestion today: is last humans alive are living on a satellite that's orbiting the Earth. So a couple different ways we can go here at this point, I think. One is to have, now that we've got some kind of presentation of the state of our characters and how they're looking at the Earth in relationship to the suggestion, like to the fact that, you know, they're the only people still, the only humans still going. But now if we want, one of the things that we can do on our page is to have focus on some of their expressions. You know, and allow that investment for, you know, the reader to get the fact that, you know, there's melancholia here and there's. You can even do something fun, and this is one of the beautiful things about comics, is that we can say one line of dialogue and imply a completely additional element that we haven't visualized. Like just by having the three of them looking at this view screen with the planet Earth in it, and one of them says to the other ones, how's Johnson doing? Well, he's finally stopped screaming. He's sleeping now. And then there's a fourth character. That's one of the things I like about the blending of visual and textual story elements, is that we can always do something a little bit more. So Vicky, what we do here is people suggest a random, story idea for a one-page story, and I gotta come up with it. And so I do this each day. So I'm just using the white gel pen to highlight certain bits of our guy. And I'm also using it to widen his trunk out to correct that little omission, that little error. It's going to take a couple of goes because the jelly ink, she doesn't want to stay. And then we'll put the folds in the back of the jacket. And some value for the pants there. All right, so there's our first one. Let's put some little salt and pepper in that hair. So there's our character's head. Now I'm going to come in and fiddle about with the earth and stuff in a second too, but all right, so here is our second person. Leaning forward towards the railing like they do in the previous panel, resting on their hand. And let's accentuate some of the folds a little bit there. And down in the pants area. There we are. Worldwide pants. And our last character here, we'll get that. So I'm also going to beep, 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 beep. There's those dots. Accentuate those a little bit. So let's get accentuation lines on this guy. And there's some of the folds in his outfit. All right, so there we go. We got our three guys looking at the screen. We flipped the image. So let's, oops, I almost dropped my pen. So let's use this, whatever this thing it was in the jelly image. Let's accentuate that so that we've got a frame in our space vehicle. All right, and now we're going to do the ceiling. And so I think we'll be looking at, and let's continue this pattern, but we're going to reduce it down in size. And then we'll force that perspective away from. So the previous one, because we want to make the idea of that the room is going this way. And this one, the room is coming towards us. And then the next one, the room is going that way. So there we go. Okay, sorry I did that off screen. So here's the 3 right now. Oh, zooming is such a challenging thing for me. My one hand, it never picks up on. It's the weirdest thing, isn't it? It's just weird, Chris. You're weird. All right, so there we go. We'll look closer. So there's the top 3 panels. We got our satellite, we got the people looking at the view screen, we've got the flip image of us seeing what they're looking at. So I'm going to come through now with the white. Gelli, I think we're ready for this, Gelli. You're welcome to anyone that got a song stuck in your head. Okay, so I'm going to follow some cloud formations throughout the earth. Just give some interesting texture and movement. Nothing worse than a boring planet. It's tricky, this pen, because it has a larger ball in the center of it, as opposed to... Oh, I'll show you another brand. So this is a Sakura, and this is a Uniball. And the Sakura one is a much smaller ball in the head of the pen, so that you don't get this central drag line that you do a lot of times with the Uniball. So it comes out far more thickly. All right, so there's that. Let's tighten up our composition a little bit. Now that the blue is dried some, we'll come in with this white using a pencil because it's softer than the Gelli pen. And we'll put our ceiling tiles in, or roof plates, whatever you want to call them. Top squares. I don't know, I can't think of anything else. So there's that. Now when I scan this, okay, I can put a separation line between the 2 panels. Well, I've got a separation space there, but I didn't do one over here. So we can do that. We have the technologies. The magic of the Photoshop. Photoshop. It's not just for breakfast anymore. Okay. So I'm going to take the Uniball here. Just want the thinnest of little lines. And then just pushing that little glares off the television there. Okay, so there we go. There's the stars in the sky. Stars in the sky. They're all leaning on a jukebox. What a bunch of heroes. All right. So last thing I'm going to do here is push back these spaces underneath. Just got to push them. Okay. there we go. So let's see what that. Oh, zoom nonsense. There we go. So there's our third panel now. So we've got our little top line going across where we've got satellite, the survivors looking at the old homestead. Oh, Liz just asked Lucy. Lucy was just in here, Liz. Corbin was pretty depressed and feeling kind of clingy and needy with Dad, and was bored a lot. So we got another cat for him to have a friend in the house, and her name is Lucy, and she looks exactly like Corbin, but she's about 1/3 the size, and she's very squeaky. So there's our first three. Oh my goodness! Let's see if I can get it in the frame. How are we doing? We did it! Go team! Go team! Go! So there's our first three panels. I think that what might be interesting is to take our characters and to focus on them and a little dialogue, and suggest the idea of what I said earlier, is that there's another one. Lucy in the sky, I meant. Oh, there you go. Nice. Yeah, so then I'm going to have each of them, responsive to the fact that they're the last survivors alive that are human beings. And they're in this little satellite floating, and, well, what do we do now? Right? Lots of fun. Because they don't really know what's going on down there. So that's a fun little dialogue to try to incorporate into the page. And so it'll be drawing, a couple recurring talking figures here. And then I think what I might do in this section over here on this side of the page is that mentioning the one or two other crew members that are both resting right now and trying to process what's going on, I can show the dormitory here, or the sick bay, or wherever it is that they're sleeping. And so I can take whatever this ephemera is and turn it into a place that has two people in two beds. So, although I don't really know what it is. Kind of looks like a shop. Maybe it's the Hadron Collider. Who knows? It's not. But yeah, so that's what I'm going to do for this, for posting it tomorrow. So this is the second page we're working on today. The page I drew at 7 this morning was the one that we've posted, which is the story about the Kandahar giant. And that suggestion came from Gary H. And so if you've got a one-page story suggestion, even if it's just 3 words or a line of dialogue or whatever it is, feel free to do so. And we'll do that. For those that came in late, I showed some of the work of John J. Muth and P. Craig Russell. So feel free to look back on that and take some inspirato from those two guys and see how the different types of classical art and film have influenced their working styles. And yet that foundation, that classical training foundation that the two of them clearly have, they've implemented in storytelling techniques for sequential media, for comic books. So that's fantastic. And so this is why I was talking about earlier about don't be afraid to allow whatever your external influences are in on what you do. If you like fables and fairy tales, put them in your stories. If you like, Miss Marple and whodunits, then feel free to try to structure one of those. But let's say you like Miss Marple, but you also have a fascination with Sasquatches. Why not have a Miss Marple adventure where she's trying to uncover this strange fella who lives in the woods, whatever. But there's no reason you can't do a sequential story of that if you feel so compelled to do so, and you can illustrate the forest to make it look like, pre-Raphaelite artwork that you're a big fan of. I don't know, whatever it is, right? Vicky says, I try to make story collage. I did Hobbitland on my channel. Oh, that's fantastic. Everybody, let's go check that out. That's Vicky W-O Sullivan. That's fantastic. Yeah, that's a lot of fun. Collage, there's no reason you can't collage comic stories. We've done it here on the stream recently where we did the photo collage using Kate Middleton trying to tell her kid a story about, I can't remember what it was. Boy, I do too many of these stories. But yeah, it's on the Instagram, and Facebook, and Patreon pages. But take a look. It's fun. You can even collage sequential stories. I only had one image of the kid, so I ended up replicating the kid a few times in order to have the ability to have one person talking to the other, back and forth. So there's lots of fun you can do. So there we go. All right. Linda's already said there. Thank you to everybody for coming out. I appreciate that. Linda Renz, the moderator, the mostest. Thanks everybody for coming and hanging out. I've got to get back to work on some commission projects that I have right now, but I'll get this finished off later on to post for tomorrow. I will stream at some point tomorrow. I think it's going to be later in the day. I don't know. I'll have to check because I have a meeting at 7 and I have a meeting at 10. So we're going to have to ham hock something in there someplace. But at the very least, I'll have this posted for tomorrow. And then, as I said before, I'm going to be away for the end of the week at a conference. So if I'll try to post some pages for that, and if not, I'll do what I can when I'm back. And then this weekend is the Chalk Drawing Festival, so it's a week, But I hope that if people are creating stuff and they want to share it, please feel free to do so. I'd love to see it. If allow yourself to explore and to try new things every day, and to take these different combinations of approaches that you've picked up along the way, and mix them up, mash them up, and tell some stories. I love to hear them, to read them. Okay, that's it for me for right now. I may be back tonight. I'm not sure. We'll see. In the meantime, thanks very much, everybody, for coming out. Thanks, everybody in the chat. Thanks again to Linda Renz, moderator the mostest. And go make something. Have some fun. Bye for now, everybody. Thanks again.